Since the dawn of human civilization, our species has suffered from a profound, incurable, and ultimately fatal delusion. It is the blinding, arrogant belief that we have achieved absolute mastery over the unforgiving forces of the physical universe. We foolishly believed that because we traded fragile wooden galleons for colossal fortresses of welded steel, the ocean had finally bowed to our will. We built massive floating palaces that openly defied the sea, packing them with the heavy luxuries of solid, unyielding ground. But the unforgiving, absolute laws of physics and fluid dynamics do not recognize human hubris, and they never issue warnings. The ocean does not forget, and it does not forgive. It merely waits patiently in the pitch-black, freezing depths below. In the suffocating darkness of the Baltic Sea, this collective technological arrogance was destined to be paid for in human lives. The toll would be exacted in a currency of sheer terror. 852 innocent souls swallowed by the abyss. The date is September 27th, 1994, an era where the world felt invincible, trusting completely in the marvels of steel. The MS Estonia sits moored in the bustling port of Tallinn, a magnificent ro-ro passenger ferry preparing for its overnight voyage. She is a true leviathan of the modern age, carrying 989 souls within her sprawling, luxurious labyrinth. Deep inside her massive steel belly, she houses extravagant restaurants, humid saunas, and neon-lit casinos buzzing with electric, vibrant energy. Outside, however, the sky bleeds into a bruised purple, and the barometric pressure plummets as winds begin to howl with intensity. Yet, inside the ship's warmly lit saloons, passengers clink champagne glasses to live bands, utterly oblivious to the gathering wrath. The colossal welded steel hull beneath their feet provides a flawless, intoxicating illusion of absolute, unbreakable security against the swells. But beneath the passenger decks, hidden away from the warm lights, an entirely different, incredibly dangerous architectural world quietly exists. It is a massive, cavernous, hollow steel tunnel known as the car deck, stretching nearly the entire length of the ship. This vast, uncompartmentalized space forms a dangerous open hollow situated terrifyingly close to the turbulent, freezing waterline of the sea. To allow massive transport trucks to drive directly into her belly, the entire front of the vessel opens using a hinged nose. This 50-ton steel mechanism, known as the bow visor, is a logistical marvel, but a deadly, unarmored chin against violent storms. As the clock ticks past midnight, the dark ocean mutates into towering, chaotic, 6-meter-high vertical walls of pure kinetic destruction. The storm begins to batter the MS Estonia with deafening violence, each heavy wave striking the forward hull like a sledgehammer. Every impact sends violent, shuddering shockwaves deep through the heavy steel spine, physically shaking the alcohol in the passengers' glasses. Unbeknownst to the hundreds sleeping peacefully in the lower decks, the ocean has successfully isolated the ship's most vulnerable mechanical flaw. Despite the escalating ferocity of the tempest, the captains, blinded by the modern obsession with strict schedules, stubbornly refuse to slow down. They force the mighty ship to punch relentlessly through the massive black swells, directly accelerating the devastating fatigue of heavy metal. For hours, thousands of tons of freezing water pound against the visor, agonizingly tearing at the rusted steel locking pins. Deep inside the housing, heavy hinges groan in the darkness, microscopic fractures spiderwebbing through cold metal in a silent, invisible countdown. Down in the dark, heavily shadowed car deck, a few crewmen hear a chilling, unnatural metallic banging echoing over the storm, but they cannot see the massive steel visor physically tearing away from the hull. The ship is completely blind to its own decapitation. At precisely 01:15 a.m., the absolute breaking point of 20th century metallurgy is finally, catastrophically, and permanently reached. A deafening, apocalyptic metallic screech echoes through the freezing storm, the sound of modern engineering surrendering unconditionally to natural power. The massive 50-ton steel visor is violently ripped from its hinges, thick securing bolts snapping in midair like fragile, dry twigs. It plunges like a severed, immensely heavy anvil into the churning black depths, violently crashing against the hidden bulbous bow beneath. The MS Estonia's primary shield is instantly gone. Its massive mechanical throat is laid completely bare to the ravenous, crushing ocean. A massive, unstoppable wall of dark, freezing water surges directly into the illuminated, cavernous, steel interior of the car deck. Thousands of tons of heavy salt water pour in every single second, transforming into a dark, raging, and unstoppable indoor river. The dark swirling floodwaters pick up heavily loaded commercial transport trucks and family sedans, effortlessly tossing them like hollow plastic toys. Heavy steel chains snap, and the deafening sound of vehicles violently crunching against bulkheads echoes through the surging indoor tide. Then, the most lethal, mathematical enemy of any maritime vessel is instantly unleashed upon the doomed ferry: the free surface effect. As thousands of tons of loose water violently slosh from side to side, the ship's vital center of gravity is completely destroyed. The absolute laws of physics take total unyielding control. The immense weight rapidly accumulates entirely on the starboard side of the deck. In mere moments, the massive floating city leans heavily to the right, permanently listing at a terrifying 15-degree angle into the storm. Up in the brightly lit passenger decks, the flawless illusion of absolute safety shatters instantly, replaced by a sudden collective doom. Gravity, the most fundamental force on Earth, violently betrays the passengers. Hundreds of glasses smash simultaneously onto the tilted floor. Sheer panic erupts in the once peaceful lounges as people are violently thrown from their chairs, frantically grabbing onto fixed brass railings. Heavy, ornate wooden grand pianos violently slide across the tilted rooms, crashing into thick glass displays in a chaotic, destructive symphony. But a 15-degree list is only the very beginning of the nightmare. The massive waterfall of dark ocean water continues pouring in unabated. The sheer compounding weight of the invading ocean physically pulls the colossal vessel further down, rapidly increasing the horrifying list. The ship's luxurious architecture instantly transforms into a deadly weapon. Heavy slot machines become lethal projectiles raining down on trapped passengers. For the hundreds of innocent people sleeping soundly in the lowest cabin decks beneath the waterline, the sudden list is an immediate death sentence. They awake to the horrifying sound of the ocean tearing through their thin walls, freezing water violently surging down narrow corridors. Their familiar warm cabins instantly morph into an inescapable, surreal house of horrors, where the concepts of up and down cease to exist. Then comes the ultimate, most profound and deeply claustrophobic nightmare. The heavy 15,000-ton hull surrenders entirely, rolling to 90 degrees. The colossal passenger ferry now rests completely on its starboard side in the raging sea, its massive red funnel touching the black waves. As the immense ship falls, the heavy diesel main generators deep in the lower engine rooms immediately drown in the floodwaters. The engines sputter and die, instantly plunging the entire MS Estonia into a suffocating, heavy, and absolutely impenetrable pitch-black darkness. The vibrant, buzzing life of the floating city dies in that second, the silence broken only by rushing water and agonizing human screams. The absolute blackness is replaced only by the weak, terrifying, blood-red glow of the emergency lights flickering against rusted, tilted metal. For the hundreds trapped deep within the lower decks, the familiar, reassuring geometry of their surroundings is violently, permanently erased from reality. Long carpeted corridors transform instantly into deep bottomless vertical pits, dropping directly down into the dark, churning, and freezing water below. Heavy wooden cabin doors, their only possible way out, are suddenly located impossibly on the ceiling, completely out of human reach. The original carpeted floor beneath their feet has become an impossible sheer vertical wall, entirely unclimbable in the dark, claustrophobic trap. The original sidewalls are now acting as the floor, deeply cluttered with shattered mirrors, torn carpets, and massive, impassable piled furniture. Extreme, profound disorientation reigns supreme. Human senses simply cannot comprehend the upside-down, 90-degree nightmare illuminated only by dying crimson emergency bulbs. People frantically crawl over smooth wooden doors and shattered glass fixtures, desperately trying to navigate a 90-degree vertical steel labyrinth. Their bare hands bleed on broken glass, their minds fractured by the sheer, unadulterated terror of being trapped inside a sinking sideways box. And all the while, the freezing, completely unforgiving water rapidly chases them from below, aggressively swallowing deck after dark deck in absolute silence. Staircases, the only vital arteries to salvation, and the open upper decks are now completely useless, horizontal, and utterly impassable death traps. The vintage ship staircases have turned 90 degrees, rendering the familiar steps as completely smooth, vertical ledges mathematically impossible to ascend. The freezing dark water methodically creeps up these impossible stairwells, silently claiming the lives of those who cannot pull themselves up the sheer drops. The ship's highly praised, luxurious internal design has rapidly and brutally become a cold, unyielding, and inescapable steel underwater coffin. It is perfectly accidentally engineered to trap hundreds of innocent souls within its flooded belly, condemning them to the most terrifying death imaginable. A fortunate, incredibly desperate few manage to claw their way through the twisted wreckage, pulling themselves up the vertical walls to the outer hull. They emerge from the red-lit, flooding labyrinth, only to realize that reaching the outside is absolutely not an immediate maritime salvation. It is merely stepping from a dark, claustrophobic nightmare directly into a vast, expansive, and freezing hell ruled entirely by the merciless Baltic storm. The Baltic storm shows absolutely no mercy. The freezing wind howls like a choir of banshees, violently tearing at their soaked, freezing clothes. Freezing, aggressive rain slashes mercilessly at their faces like thousands of broken glass shards, blinding them as they cling desperately to the slippery hull. The mighty MS Estonia is now completely conquered, a humiliated leviathan groaning in profound structural agony as the ocean prepares to drag it down. The immense stern lifts high into the dark sky, exposing its massive brass propellers as the vessel slowly, terrifyingly inverts completely upside down. Trapped air inside the massive hull hisses and screams in high-pitched agony, violently forced out by the immense crushing pressure of the invading sea. Thick, violent white bubbles burst explosively on the pitch-black surface, venting the last breaths of the dying ship as it begins its vertical plunge. It abandons the desperate survivors clinging to its hull, forcing them directly into the violent, freezing waves of the Baltic Sea. Those who leap or are washed into the churning black water are instantly, brutally assaulted by the absolute freezing temperature of the Northern Ocean. It is a cold so absolute and vicious that it immediately paralyzes their lungs, seizes their exhausted muscles, and rapidly stops their beating hearts. Extreme hypothermia is a violent, agonizing biological shutdown where the body frantically shivers itself into paralyzing rigidity in the dark, endless water. There is no grand rescue. The storm is too fierce, the waves too towering, the night too dark, and the isolation too profound for salvation. People cling to completely overturned orange life rafts, singing hymns into the howling wind, knowing with absolute certainty that closing their eyes means death. But one by one, the relentless ocean methodically drains the heat and hope from their fragile bodies, and their voices fade away into the storm. Hours later, when the first battered rescue helicopters pierce through the raging storm clouds at dawn, the ocean has already settled its deadly account. Harsh white searchlights sweep across a desolate, horrific seascape, illuminating a vast, tragic graveyard, rising and falling endlessly with the massive, black waves. The freezing waters are densely littered with hundreds of abandoned, empty vintage orange life jackets, silently bobbing like bright aquatic tombstones. Each empty jacket marks the exact, terrifying spot where human hope and physical endurance literally froze to death in the merciless Baltic water. The light illuminates overturned life rafts surrounded by scattered debris, a silent testament to the absolute failure of modern maritime safety equipment. Out of the 989 souls who boarded with simple dreams of tomorrow, only 137 miraculously survived the fury. 852 innocent people vanish entirely into the dark, their futures permanently erased from the earth in a matter of mere hours. Most victims are violently pulled down into the flooded steel maze, permanently entombed in upside-down corridors, unable to escape the 90-degree trap. The rest are agonizingly claimed by the biting frost of the open sea, swallowed by the very ocean they confidently sought to conquer. The MS Estonia disaster instantly becomes one of the worst peacetime maritime tragedies of the 20th century, a brutal wake-up call to an arrogant world. Today, the heavily rusted carcass of the MS Estonia rests deep at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, shrouded in an eternal, lightless darkness. It is a massive, untouchable underwater cemetery, strictly protected by an unprecedented international treaty declaring it a sacred permanent mass grave. No professional diver is legally allowed to approach. No commercial salvage operation can ever disturb the trapped souls resting within its corroding walls. A rusted steel door remains permanently sealed, covered in marine snow, forever keeping the dark, claustrophobic secrets of those final, terrifying minutes. The wreck stands as a chilling, monumental reminder that nature will inevitably humiliate modern steel. Completely indifferent to our proud engineering marvels, the ocean does not care about maritime schedules, artificial luxury, welded iron, or our supreme confidence. It only demands absolute, unwavering respect. A single moment of stubborn human pride can unleash massive kinetic forces that violently turn our greatest achievements into forgotten, underwater ash. As we continue to build larger floating palaces, we must always remember the 852 souls who learned this ultimate, fatal lesson. The calm, entirely peaceful surface of the ocean today, perfectly and deceptively, masks the massive claustrophobic steel tomb lying silently in the darkness below. History is not dead. It is never dead. It only slumbers silently in the freezing, lightless depths, patiently waiting to be remembered by the arrogant generations that will inevitably follow us. We will inevitably meet again in the next era, when humanity once more predictably forgets the terrifying lessons written in deep water and innocent blood. You are watching Past Resurrected. Until the next era,